I wrote a book called Explanations and Corrections in the Gospel of Luke, and I have in that chapter a section. uh, I have in that book a chapter or section about the times of the Gentiles mentioned by Luke in chapter 21. I say in the book that Luke was absolutely right when he said that the abomination of desolation was Roman armies, and that the abomination of desolation was also the wild beast in Daniel 7. That's probably where the verb to trample comes from in Daniel 21, and that's also where the time and times and half a time comes from. But Luke did not quote the actual words of Daniel, which were probably also the actual words of Jesus. Instead, he wrote the times of the Gentiles to prevent people from misunderstanding a figurative expression. So I'll start reading from a section in that chapter. Claremont-Ganneau's theory about Daniel 5:25 may help explain the phrase in Daniel 7:25. I'm less confident about the information below, which is based on the idea that the handwriting on the wall contained the names of weights used on balances. Whether Claremont-Ganneau's theory is right or wrong, Kairos still does not mean year. And whether his theory is right or wrong, Luke really did substitute the times of the Gentiles for a time and times and half a time. I don't have any insight into the archaeological or linguistic merits of this argument, but I'll mention it because it is a way to explain the expression a time and times and half a time. The words many, tekel, uparsin are in many translations of Daniel 5:25. Some modern commentaries say that the words are four nouns, meaning a mana, a shekel, and half manas. In the journal Asiatique in 1886, Claremont-Ganneau explained his theory that the words on the wall were weights. The author thought that the word for half manas was in a dual number. Here's a reference to Claremont-Ganneau's article in a dictionary of the Bible. This term, most scholars now agree in finding, is first suggested by M. Claremont-Ganneau in the Paris and Uparsin of Daniel 5:28 and 25, the mysterious writing on the wall signifying, not as the Revised Version's margin says, numbered weight in divisions, but a mana, a shekel, and half manas. The word that the quotation called this term was Paris, or half mana. The Revised Version, referred to above, reads the same as the King James Version, American Standard Version, and numerous other Bibles in the text. Mene, tekel, uparsin. The marginal reading in the Revised Version, and the correct name of that is the Holy Bible containing the Old and New Testaments, Volume 4, 1885, defines the words saying. So this is what he was referring to. RVM means the margin of the Revised Version. That is numbered weight in divisions. But that marginal definition was wrong according to Claremont-Ganneau's theory. The margin should instead say, that is, a mana, a shekel, and half manas. Notice that this theory is that these are four nouns, not verbs. That encyclopedia article presents a chart showing a shekel to be equal to 50 manas, but some say a shekel is 60 or some other number of manas. The interpretation is in Daniel 5:25 through 28. Verses 26 through 28 in the American Standard Version read, this is the interpretation of the thing. Many, God hath numbered thy kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Paris, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Daniel's interpretation doesn't seem to make sense based on the meanings of mina, shekel, and half minas, because the interpretation depends on a play on words understandable in Aramaic. Since the king, not his reign, is being weighed, I think that we are to picture Belshazzar in one of the pans on the balance and the weights in the other pan. For some reason, Belshazzar suddenly weighs less than the weights, and the pan that holds him up flies up as if weightless. There is a theory that the words mene, mene, tekel, upharsin represent money instead of weights, but an argument I present below requires them to be weights used for an ancient balance or scale. So this section says time and times and half a time has similarities to mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. Francis Brown wrote that Clermont-Ganneau was confused by the sequence of the weights. This would give, with the present division of words, a mina, a shekel, and 2 half minas. Since, however, a shekel is only the 60th or the 100th part of a mina, he thinks it unlikely that these 3 weights would be arranged in this order. The 3 weights have an unexpected sequence, neither progressing from lower values to higher values, nor declining from higher values to lower ones. The smallest unit, the shekel, is in the middle of the phrase. The expression time and times and half a time also has an illogical order. The logical order would be either 2 times and a time and half a time, arranging the units in descending order, or else the order could be half a time and a time and 2 times in ascending order. Both puzzling expressions contain a noun in the dual number. Commentaries agree that the Aramaic word for half minas is dual in number. It means 2 half minas. Likewise, commentaries agree that the plural word times in the phrase in Daniel 7:25 is dual in number. That is, there is widespread agreement that the phrase under discussion does not mean a time and 3 times and half a time, but only a time and 2 times and half a time. Since there are 2 half minas, there are actually 3 minas total, equal to 50 or 60 shekels each, plus a shekel. If I have it figured out correctly, God determined that Belshazzar weighed 181 shekels when he was found wanting. 60 plus 60 plus 1 plus 30 plus 30 equals 181 shekels. That is the weight that somehow showed Belshazzar to be wanting or too light. Belshazzar was king as long as he was on the balance, but the duration of his reign is not stated. I guess that God put one last shekel on one side of the balance, resulting in Belshazzar's side of the balance going up as if weightless. How can the time and times and half a time be imagined in Daniel 7:25? It may figuratively represent the period of time that the last horn of the 4th beast would be on God's scale until God had found him wanting, using his weights. Maybe God's scale and weights are understood, but not mentioned in Daniel 7. After being found wanting or weightless, after the time and times and half a time, the dominion of that horn was taken away. The reader of Daniel 5 was not supposed to add the weights to see how many shekels the king weighed, the way I did above, and the reader of Daniel 7 was not supposed to add the times. The language in Daniel 5 is figurative. The reader is only supposed to understand the theme of the book of Daniel as expressed in Daniel 2:21 as applied specifically to Belshazzar. And he changeth the times in the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. A complete explanation of the original phrase a time and times and half a time is impossible for the modern reader. So it's enough for the reader of Daniel 7 to understand that Daniel 2:21 was to be applied to the last horn of the fourth beast, the one that spoke great words against the Most High. That is, the last horn would be removed as a king when the time God granted him was over. This chapter is about the Gentile times in Luke. My digression about the mysterious words in Daniel 5 is to support my claim that the times of the Gentiles of Luke is the same as the time and times and half a time in Daniel 7, which phrase is not understandable from the context and therefore needs an inspired interpreter. Daniel interpreted the handwriting on the wall in Daniel 5:17 through 28. Luke interpreted the phrase in Daniel 7:25 and in Luke 21:24. And Luke interpreted the time and times and half a time in plain words because Daniel didn't. The interpretation was the simple words, the times of the Gentiles. When Luke substituted times of the Gentiles for time and times and half a time, he was substituting the literal meaning of a figurative expression that few people understood in his time. Luke may have thoroughly understood the two cryptic phrases under discussion, but instead of actually explaining metaphors and answering all the questions we would like to ask, Luke's habit in his gospel was just to substitute the metaphors' meanings. Ancient readers of Daniel at some time in the past may have recognized the time and times and half a time in one Daniel story as an allusion to the shekel and minas and half minas in the other Daniel story. Luke rephrased the time and times and half a time as the times of the Gentiles and meant the duration of time that God allotted to the Gentiles or to the fourth beast. The unusual phrase might have signified imaginary weights used to measure time, just as the minas and shekels were weights to measure Belshazzar. Jehovah measures mountains, hearts, and spirits, according to several scriptures in the Bible. 1 Samuel 2:3 says that God weighs men's actions. Psalm 62:9 speaks of men being weighed in a balance and found lighter than vanity. God has a figurative balance and figurative weights to do all this weighing.